In every shadow, there's a story the world tried to forget. In every silence, a scream that never stopped echoing. These are the truths buried in cold archives and blood-stained snow. Welcome to the DREAD Diaries, where fear is always real. Hit that subscribe button if you dare, because once you enter the DREAD Diaries, you don't come back the same. The search party found the boy's jacket twisted around a branch 15 feet off the ground. No footprints below it, no signs of a struggle, no drag marks in the frost. Just an empty patch of earth and a wind that seemed to hush itself the moment the men stepped into the clearing. It was December 1949, deep inside the Glastonbury wilderness, the heart of what locals quietly called the place where people go missing without noise. Even the most seasoned hunters avoided the dense ridge lines and cratered trails of the Bennington Triangle, a crooked wedge of forest stretching across the old lumber towns of Vermont. And on that morning, the woods felt wrong. Too cold. Too still. As if the trees themselves were waiting. Sheriff Langford knelt beside the discarded jacket, his breath trembling into the air. He couldn't have climbed up there, he muttered. Not without someone seeing. But no one saw anything. The boy, 12-year-old James Tetford, had been hiking with his older cousin only 10 minutes before vanishing. One moment he was walking ahead through a corridor of pines. The next, he was simply gone. No cry, no footsteps breaking into a run. Just a snap of wind, a flicker of shadows, and silence swallowing the trail. Langford stood and squinted at the canopy above him. The branches sagged under early snowfall, but one section, right above the path, was unnaturally bare. As if the snow had been shaken loose sometime within the hour. And yet again, no footprints. "Mark this," Langford ordered. But the deputy scribbling on his clipboard couldn't shake the feeling that writing anything down here felt useless. As if the forest would erase the evidence the moment they turned away. 3 years earlier, in 1946, a college student named Paula Jean Weldon had disappeared along the same stretch of woods. Her case had become the talk of the region, a young woman seen by several hikers, walking confidently along the trail, until she reached the fork just past Bickford Hollow. After that, no one could agree on what happened. Some said she turned left. Others said right. One old man insisted she was still ahead of him when he reached the fork, but when he blinked, she wasn't there. "Just thin air where she used to be," he told reporters. But the papers trimmed that line out. The sheriff at the time had insisted she'd run away. But locals whispered a different theory. The forest took her. Not by magic or monsters, but by something older. The land, wounded from decades of logging, mining, and the cemeteries relocated without care. A place that remembered. On the morning after finding the boy's jacket, Langford arrived at the station to discover a woman waiting for him, tall, pale, and gripping a map so tightly the edges had torn. Her name was Helen Price. Her brother, Joseph, had gone missing 5 days earlier. She didn't cry, didn't tremble. "I grew up in these woods," she said. He'd never get lost. Something happened to him out there. Something no one wants to talk about. Langford gestured for her to sit, though he already knew her story before she spoke it. Joseph had been a woodsman, experienced, familiar with the terrain since childhood. Neighbors saw him leave home for a short afternoon walk. He never returned. His footprints stopped at the base of a ravine, as if he had stepped forward, and then simply decided not to exist anymore. No tracks leading out? Helen asked. Langford hesitated, then shook his head. No. No signs of a fall. No. She leaned closer, voice dropping. Then something took him. The sheriff bristled. "Ma'am, there's nothing in those woods but cliffs, caves, and bad weather." Helen unfolded her torn map, revealing dozens of red pins stabbed into the paper, each marking a reported disappearance. Most clustered around the southern edge of Glastonbury Mountain. A pattern almost like a spiral. "You see that shape?" she whispered. "Every missing person lines up along those ridges. Sheriff, something is drawing people in." He wanted to dismiss her. Wanted to insist that the missing had slipped, fled, gotten lost, or chosen to disappear. But he couldn't. Because he had stood in that forest, and felt watched. By what, he did not know. Later that afternoon, Langford and Helen hiked into Bickford Hollow, the last known location of her brother. It was just past sunset. The air carried a damp cold that clung to their ribs and seemed to muffle every step. Langford paused at a split in the trail. "Paula was last seen here," he said. Helen scanned the fork, frowning. "This doesn't feel right." "Meaning?" She pointed at the left path. "Look at the ground. No animals. No prints. Even the snow hasn't settled normally." Langford noticed it then, the subtle downward curve, as if the earth had sunk under heavy weight, or had swallowed something. The trees loomed overhead, branches twisted in unnatural angles, knuckled and tense. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No birds. No wind. Just the sound of their breathing. Helen whispered, "Do you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Nothing. That's the problem." She took a slow step forward. The air grew heavier, as if entering a room after an argument had already happened, as if stepping into grief. And then Langford spotted something half hidden in a cluster of roots, a scrap of fabric. Faded green. Torn at the edges. Helen froze. "That's from Joseph's jacket." She reached out, but Langford stopped her. "Don't touch it yet." He crouched, examining the ground around the cloth. No footprints. Not hers. Not his. Not Joseph's. No disturbances of the moss or soil. Just a single scrap lying there, perfectly placed. As if someone had set it down, not dropped it. Before he could speak, a crack echoed from deeper in the woods. Sharp, metallic, unnatural. Both of them spun toward the sound. Another crack. Closer. And then, a voice. Not quite a voice. More like a breath forcing itself into shape. A low, broken whisper curling through the trees. "Help." Helen's eyes widened. "That's him. That's my brother." Langford grabbed her arm. "We don't know that." The whisper came again, frayed and distant. "Help me." Helen stepped forward instinctively, but Langford yanked her back just as a third sound cut through the forest. A snap. Not from ahead. From behind them. They both turned. And that's when they saw it on the trail, a footprint. Fresh. Deep. Pressed into the snow within the last few seconds. But it wasn't theirs. And it wasn't heading toward them. It was heading away. Into the dark. The forest changed overnight. By the time we returned at dawn, the trail where Paula Weldon was last seen felt rearranged. The same trees. The same moss-covered stones. But every step carried a wrongness you could feel in the back of your teeth. We weren't alone this time. Search teams, locals, state police. They stood in small clusters, whispering like they were afraid of waking something up. No one wanted to be the first to walk into the tree line. The cold was sharper today. Thin. Like the air had been strained through metal. I started recording immediately. "This is day 2 of the Bennington investigation," I whispered into the mic. "The atmosphere is different. Almost staged. People are reporting silence." And the silence was real. No birds. No crunch of leaves unless someone stepped. Even the wind seemed to stop just before reaching us, like it didn't want to trespass. The lead tracker, an older man who'd searched this forest for 40 years, stepped forward. "Stay close," he muttered, eyes scanning the canopy. "This place plays tricks." He didn't elaborate. They never did. As we walked, that sensation returned, the creeping feeling from Chapter 1, the sense that something had been watching Paula Weldon when she vanished. Not a creature. Not a person. Just the forest itself, aware and waiting. We found her footprints first. 2 clean impressions preserved in a patch of damp soil. The last verified signs of her. But here's what chilled me. The footprints ended abruptly. Not scattered. Not dragged. Just stopped. Standing over them, the tracker shook his head. "I've seen people lost. I've seen people injured. They never just vanish." His voice lowered to a whisper. "Not unless they walked into something we can't see." The team spread out, calling Paula's name. Nothing answered. 10 minutes later, the first sign of trouble appeared. One of the officers found a strip of red cloth snagged on a branch. It looked torn, weathered, old. But Paula's coat had been red. The forest seemed to hold its breath as he handed it to me in an evidence bag. "How far from the trail?" I asked. "Too far," he replied. Then his radio hissed, a burst of static, sharp enough to make everyone freeze. "Back, get back. Don't go further." The voice was faint, broken, like someone whispering from underwater. "Say again," the officer barked. Nothing. Just more static. We pressed deeper. The trees began to look identical. Repeating. Like we were walking through a pattern instead of a real place. One of the younger searchers stopped abruptly. "Hold on," he murmured. "Did we just loop?" I checked the GPS. No signal. The compass? Spinning. And the forest was darker now, even though the sky was still bright overhead. The kind of dim that doesn't make sense, like the light was being swallowed before it hit the ground. The tracker halted. His breathing turned shaky. "No," he said suddenly. No, we went wrong. We went wrong. Everybody turn around. Now." "Why?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "The trees are closer." He was right. The trunks were tighter, packed unnaturally close, like they'd shifted while we walked. That's when we heard it. A faint, rhythmic sound echoing between the pines. Not footsteps, not an animal. Almost like someone knocking against wood. Slow. Deliberate. A searcher near the back of the line spoke first. "Is someone signaling?" The tracker's voice broke. "That's not a person." We began retreating fast, trying to move as one. But the knocking grew louder. Closer. Matching our pace. Like it was following the rhythm of our own steps. The youngest searcher panicked and broke into a run. "Don't!" the tracker shouted. Too late. In seconds he was gone. Not screamed. Not pulled away. Just gone, swallowed by the tree line like he'd stepped behind an invisible curtain. We froze in place. I stared at the space where he had been. The forest looked normal again. No movement. No sign of a struggle. Just emptiness. The tracker grabbed my arm. "We're leaving. Now." We ran. Branches whipped at our clothes, the forest blurring into streaks of dark green and gray. The knocking faded, replaced by another sound, the distant calling of our own names, repeated in voices that didn't belong to anyone on the team. We burst through the tree line and stumbled into the clearing, gasping like we'd been underwater for hours. The others stared at us. "Where's Carter?" someone asked. No one answered. It took 37 minutes for the reality to set in. Another disappearance. Another name added to the Bennington Triangle. And no explanation. As I ended the recording for the day, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. We had come to find Paula Weldon. Instead, the forest had taken someone else. And deep inside the trees, something waited, patient, quiet, calculating, for whoever walked in next. The command post went quiet the moment we returned. Not because we were injured. Not because we were shaken. But because we were missing a man. Carter's name spread through the camp like a cold wind. His partner sat down on a fallen log and refused to speak. The older officers stared at the tree line as if expecting it to apologize. No one volunteered to go back inside. But I had to. This wasn't just a documentary anymore. It was evidence. And if the forest really was swallowing people, if there was something about the terrain or the psychology of isolation causing men and women to slip into the earth, then someone had to be the one to walk back in. The tracker approached me quietly. "You want the truth?" he asked. "Yes." "Then you walk the last stretch alone." The camp froze at his words. But he wasn't being dramatic. His eyes were steady, resigned, like this was the only answer left after decades of watching the forest claim more names. Everyone who vanished, he said, was separated from the group. Even for a moment. Even for a few steps. I swallowed. "Then why would you send me alone?" to see what happens when someone walks back. He led me to the trailhead and stopped. If you see something strange, he said, don't explore. If you hear a voice, don't respond. And if you feel watched, he hesitated. You will feel watched. Just keep walking. The trees accepted me like a closing door. Inside the forest, the air felt different again. Thicker, colder, weighted. My breath fogged even though the temperature shouldn't allow it. The ground softened, absorbing sound like carpet. Every 20 steps, I turned on the recorder. This is the final day of the investigation, I whispered. I'm retracing the last known routes. Paula Weldon. Mid-Dye Rivers. James Tetford. Frida Langer. And now, Carter. Saying their names felt like stepping into their footprints. 100 yards in, I found the first sign. A glove. Not old. Not weathered. Carter's. The fingers were stiff, curled like they had grabbed at something during the final moment he was still visible. I documented it carefully, then continued. The forest tightened around me. Branches leaned inward like eavesdroppers. The silence deepened until it felt like pressure on my skull. 5 minutes later, I found something worse. Footprints. Fresh ones. Human. Running. They stopped the same way Paula's had. Abruptly. Cleanly. As if the person had stepped out of existence. And directly beside them, something I didn't expect. My own footprints. From earlier that morning. Only. I hadn't walked this far. And I certainly hadn't run. My throat tightened. I pressed my back to a tree and forced myself to breathe. Hypervigilance. Anxiety. Pattern recognition malfunctioning under stress. I'd read enough case studies to know what isolation did to cognition. But then I heard it. A single voice. Faint. Calling my name. Not desperate. Not hostile. Just familiar. Carter. My heart slammed against my ribs. No, I whispered. Not real. But the voice came again. Same tone, same rhythm, same inflection I'd heard around the campfire the night before. Here, over here. I squeezed my eyes shut. Auditory hallucination. High stress. Sensory deprivation. All documented responses in search and rescue psychology. But when I opened my eyes, there was a shape between the trees. Not a creature. Not a person. Just a darker patch of forest. A silhouette formed by overlapping trunks. Standing still. Facing me. I blinked and it dissolved into regular trees. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw the path. A narrow break between the pines. Perfectly straight. Almost like a corridor. I shouldn't have walked toward it. Every instinct screamed not to. But the path looked deliberate. Engineered. And every disappearance in the Bennington Triangle involved a wrong turn, a side path, a shortcut no one else could find again. So I stepped onto it. 20 feet in, the forest behind me sealed shut, the corridor gone, replaced by dense walls of pine. The path ahead narrowed. The trees leaned closer. And beneath the soil, I swear I felt movement. Not alive, just shifting, like something deep underground turning over. The voice came again. Closer. This way. The air tasted metallic. My recorder buzzed with static. Every muscle screamed to run, but I forced myself forward until the path ended abruptly in a clearing I had never seen on any map. A circle of stones. Weathered. Sunken. Arranged with intention. In the center, a pile of belongings. Cloth. Shoes. Backpacks. A compass. A camera. A red coat. Paula's coat. Every missing person, all together. Preserved. Untouched. As if placed there by careful hands. Then the static on my recorder cut out. And a single word came through. Not Carter's voice. A whisper. Old. Dry. Almost tired. Run. I didn't need to hear it twice. I bolted through the trees, crashing through branches and roots until the forest finally thinned and the world brightened. I stumbled out of the tree line and collapsed in front of the search teams. The tracker ran to me. What happened? What did you see? I looked up at him, shaking. Everything. And nothing. Later, when they searched the area I described, the clearing was gone. No stones. No belongings. No path. Nothing. The Bennington Triangle had swallowed it back down. That night, as I packed to leave Vermont, I replayed my recorder one last time. The final whisper was still there. But now a second voice followed it. My own. Repeating back the word. Run. I don't remember saying it. I don't remember hearing it. But the forest does. And somewhere inside those pines, quiet, patient, watchful, it's waiting for the next person who thinks the disappearances are just stories.